In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Marianne's guests are leaders in their field, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in their own work. They teach others to develop, refocus, and grow. Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. And remember, make every moment count.
Welcome to Moments with Marianne. We are here with a very special guest today. Her name is Riva Levinson. She is the president and CEO of KRL International, LLC, which is a Washington-based communications and government relations firm that focuses on emerging markets. Now, Riva has written a book called Choosing the Hero, My Improbable Journey and the Rise of Africa's First Woman President. Riva herself was personally involved in helping Liberia's first woman president, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and has been a long-term advisor to her. So let's welcome to the show, Riva.
Thank you, Marianne.
Oh, thank you. It's such a pleasure to have you here on the show. So I know your new book is making waves. Anyone that reads it is just writing these amazing reviews on your book.
Thank you. So far, so good. People seem to enjoy it, and I think the theme in the world we live in of finding something worth fighting for, of choosing a hero, seems to really resonate.
Well, I would agree with you. It feels that that's something that's extremely important now, and that's one of the things. I mean, we've got some time here, so I've got many questions here for you, and I really appreciate you taking the time with us. For our listeners that are just learning about you, I know you to be this top Washington, D.C. lobbyist. What are some of the, why don't you explain a little bit about your experience and the work that you do?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Maybe, Marianne, I just want to also explain, if I may, what choosing the hero is about, and so then it makes sense what my background is. Is that okay?
Oh, of course, please.
So choosing, the full title of the book is called Choosing the Hero, My Improbable Journey and the Rise of Africa's First Woman President. It's taken me about a decade plus to collect all of the stories, largely because, like all women and mom, I multitask. I run a business, I have children, and I was writing a book. But the book was out in June, and the book tells two stories, Marianne. It tells my story as a young woman, and then a wife, and then a mother of two, spending nearly 3 decades traveling the world, often in times of conflict, and bearing witness and trying to make sense of it all, and meeting people who did not live to fight another day. And then the story is also about Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who would go on to be president of the Republic of Liberia, the first woman elected president of an African nation, the recipient of a Nobel Peace Prize, a woman who put everything on the line for what she believed in. And so choosing the hero, my improbable journey, is the intersections of our lives, how I moved forward in my life and then met Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, what we went on to do together, and what I brought to her in terms of D.C. advocacy, and then what she brought to my life, which was meaning and purpose. And so choosing the hero, again, back to the point, for me, it symbolizes the struggle we all go through to find purpose in search of something or someone we believe in. So that's the summary of the book. I didn't completely answer your question, but I thought I'd put that out there for your listeners if you bear with me.
I appreciate it, and I think, whatever pace we go at, it's perfectly fine. And it really gives our listeners the opportunity, with this book to learn about you, learn about, most people, maybe they don't know what lobbyists really do and the impact that they can have. So it's very profound, your journey, the journey that you took.
Thank you.
So did you get to a point, and for our listeners, did you get to a point where you were, kind of helping out with President-Sirleaf, and you're kind of helping her out, and you got to the point where you're like, gosh, I am really over my head. What am I doing?
That's a great question. I never felt like I was over my head, but I always challenged myself to figure out if what I was doing was making a difference for her. So, like you said, I'm a lobbyist and an advocate in Washington, D.C., and I run a small consultancy called KRL International LLC, and we work largely in emerging markets. And I met President-Sirleaf when I was at a different company, but the work was still the same. She was looking to return home to Liberia. She was in exile to bring peace to her country and to run for the presidency. That was way back in 1997. And she brought me on because she knew that no matter what she did in Liberia, it wouldn't make a difference if the U.S. didn't get its policy right. So my responsibility was to petition in the United States, the Congress, the State Department, the White House, the National Security Council, the Department of Defense, to let them know why Liberia was important and why they needed to care about the stability of the country and the sub-region. And you asked me the question of when was I ever in over my head, and so going back to that point, it took me and Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, now President Sirleaf, nearly a decade and 3 tries to get it right, to get U.S. policy right, so it created the space for her to return and run for president, and for her to succeed in putting her candidacy out there and being accepted and welcomed as a woman in a largely male-dominated culture. So maybe every day, I guess I'm in over my head, but every day I'm trying to figure out how to tread water and not be.
Well, and that makes sense. And, I have to say the journey that you took and just getting President Sirleaf, the first woman president in Africa, to be able to take her spot and lead her nation. I mean, what a journey that is. What a story.
Thank you. I mean, it's a remarkable story, and it's a privilege to tell it. And I didn't start with that degree of purpose. What the book tells, Marianne, it doesn't tell the victory. It doesn't tell the story when President Sirleaf was the president or the Nobel laureate. It shares the struggle. It shares her struggle when nobody was there and believed in her, and she had to use her pension funds to try to return to Liberia. And then it tells my struggle, working in an industry that really didn't make deliberate choices about the clients they took. And I had some moral challenges inside about the work that I did and whether I was making a difference. And the pivot in the book and the pivot in Choosing the Hero is when I am still at my old firm and I'm in a meeting and I've just met President Sirleaf, and I look at the dynamic and I realize I'm sitting on the wrong side of the table, that I want to be sitting on her side of the table. I want to be representing people like Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and her, I saw somebody who could be the future of a continent in 1997 that had very little democracy, no women leaders, and warlords and strongmen controlled most of the country. So that moment was July 1996. It was a pivot in my life in terms of deciding what I wanted to do and who I wanted to work for. And I think a pivot with Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, because I think, again, that if the U.S. hadn't gotten its policy right, no matter her bravery, her struggle, or her contribution, she would have not succeeded.
Oh, definitely, because she really did need that support that you were able to gain for her to be able to have the political climate work. Otherwise, it would have been a really difficult time. And that kind of leads me to my next question with you is, we understand how important the U.S. aid was in developing that climate, and that it couldn't happen without the U.S. aid. Was there a time when that was happening? It just wasn't happening fast enough. I know you said it took 3 tries for them to get it right.
Africa historically has been a bit of an afterthought in terms of U.S. national security priorities, Marianne, and certainly in the 1990s, early 1990s, it was. If you go back in history, you see what happened in the mid-1990s. We had a Black Hawk Down in Somalia, where the mission of peacekeeping of the U.S. military was infiltrated by al-Qaeda, and our soldiers died. We also had the Rwanda situation, tragic genocide where the world stood back and was immobilized, and 800,000 people died. So that was the dynamic in the world that Ellen Johnson Sirleaf was challenged with when she went and she returned to Liberia. And I'd say from 1997, when she ran and lost to a warlord, Charles Taylor, and to about 2003, 2004, there was very little attention to the U.S. and very little interest in getting involved, even in a limited way, even in a peacekeeping way. And in 2003, when the U.S. decided to support an African force to come and stabilize Liberia so there could be an opening for free and fair elections, that again is when President Sirleaf returned to her country from exile for the 3rd time and was able to compete and to successfully win. And since that time, the U.S. has played a remarkable role, not only in Liberia, but on the African continent. Liberia, a decade ago, was at war, and now it's considered a post-conflict success story. And a lot of that can be credited to President Sirleaf's leadership, but also a lot of it to Republican and Democratic administrations that have provided substantial assistance in health care, education, infrastructure, fiscal support, etc. And even 2014 summer, when the Ebola virus disease attacked Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea, it was the U.S. 101st Airborne that came in to help Liberia. So 90 is a difficult time. Mid-2000, now we're at a point where the U.S. is pretty engaged, not only in Liberia, but on the continent.
Well, and I know that you also serve on the advisory council called Last Mile Health, which helps nonprofit. It's a nonprofit that helps with the health care for really remote villages that also serves the African area. And you had mentioned in regards to Ebola, I believe that was something, if I remember reading correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, that is kind of something that's dear to your heart.
Yeah, thank you, Marianne, for pointing that out, because Last Mile Health is dear to my heart, as is the president and CEO, Dr. Raj Punjabi. I think that they are heroic, not only what they did in Ebola, which was they were on the front lines, and they were there and they stayed there when everybody else, frightened by the ability of the disease to destroy a healthy body with this single microscopic trace, everybody left and departed, but they came in. They were not only the first responders, they were the responders that were pre-responders. And so my hat goes off to them and to people like them. And in choosing the hero in the epilogue of the book, I celebrate the healthcare workers and all of the other people who took incredible risk in the face of a virus that was a nightmare. It was a nightmare for the country. Also, with respect to Last Mile Health, they didn't just come in crisis and leave. They've doubled down, and they've invested in working with the government to build this network of healthcare workers and workers that go out to all of the most remote communities with backpacks, who are trained, and they have the ability to provide frontline medical help and diagnose things before they happen. So I want to thank you for mentioning Last Mile Health and Dr. Raj Punjabi, because it is something near and dear to my heart. And I think I talked again going back about choosing the hero and Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, but there are people like Raj and Last Mile Health and others that are heroes that work on these type of crises every day.
Yeah. Well, a lot of those are the unsung heroes that, it's nice to be able to put the spotlight on them for a little bit so that the world can see what's really going on. And I really applaud the work that you have done to bring all of this forward in the way that you have, because if you had not been involved in the way that you are, it'd be who knows how it would turn out, how that whole region would be today.
I don't know how much credit I deserve. There's so many people who were trying to bring the spotlight to the crisis, whether it was the crisis early Liberia or Ebola. But I do like to believe that I made a contribution, and I did deliberately, in crafting Choosing the Hero, identify my role, but my role in supporting the struggle of someone I believed in, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf.
That's just beautiful. Well, so in today's climate, I could see some parallels here with President Sirleaf and our own presidential race. We have a woman candidate, first-time woman candidate in history. What would the lessons be here for Hillary Clinton in regards to the experiences that President Sirleaf has had?
Good question. I have found myself in the middle of the U.S. presidential debate for two reasons. One, the similarities between the rise of the first woman to lead an African nation as president and the opportunity that Hillary Clinton has now to potentially be president. So that's kind of one aspect. But the other aspect, maybe, Marianne, that you don't know, is that my old boss, who I worked with for a decade and is spoken about in the early chapters 1 and 2, Paul Manafort, is the chairman of the Donald Trump campaign. So I have a perspective from both sides, both of which I can talk about. But the point about the similarities between President Sirleaf and Hillary Clinton, even though the countries are so different, Liberia, one of the poorest countries in the world, about 3% of the country have access to water from a tap and electricity. Most women give birth by candlelight. It's a very, very developing country, and we have the U.S., which is one of the most developed and sophisticated countries in the world. Now, despite those dissimilarities, these women, when you look at them and you look at their life path, they're not dissimilar. They both invested so much in their own education. They both have been in the political arena for more than 40 years. They both have been able to battle very difficult gender stereotypes in Africa and in the United States. I think they're both relentless in terms of pursuing what their goals are, and they're both moms and they're both grandmoms, and they're both dedicated to public service. And I think there's a lot of similarities to them. When asked this question a few times, President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf gave me the privilege of coming here to Washington, D.C. on May 31st to launch my book, and we were both asked this question. And President-sirleaf's answer was, Hillary Clinton needs no advice from me. I think she wanted to make sure to stay out of U.S. politics.
Yeah.
But my comment was something that President-sirleaf had said to me often, and it's also repeated at the close of my book, which is to follow your heart and to not fear being understood. Because I see when I look at Hillary Clinton's comments, I see her trying to find that balance. So I hope that answers your question.
Most definitely. Most definitely. And I think it's important to have that perspective, and I definitely do appreciate President-sirleaf's, staying out of the political picture there, but it's so important to hear that perspective. Now, I know that you are really in a male-dominated industry, and I wanted to see, what has made you so successful in an industry where it's mostly all male?
Wow. I told you I wouldn't say but I did it anyway. I believe it's the philosophy that I have about the work that I do. In the advocacy business, for most people in the advocacy business, the goal is to be in play, Marianne. So you pick a side, you come, there's always two sides or three sides to an issue, and you fight, and the objective is to accrue those accounts and to be in play. And I see things a bit differently, because if you see things that way, then it protects you from caring too much, and it protects you from judging yourself too harshly. And I think what's been a bit different about me, and I think it's also why we've taken on these issues and stuck with them as much as we have, and when I say we, KRL International, is because we're pretty passionate about what we do, and we believe in the projects that we're working in. So in addition to doing what you need to do, we attach ourselves to the causes, and I think it's that passion and dedication that maybe make us unique. I'm not sure that it's a woman or a man thing, but I would say that being attached to an issue with your heart tends to be more of a woman issue than a man issue. So maybe if that helps.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I can see, your heart's so in the right place because you want to make a contribution, do the right thing, move things forward in a very positive way. So with you at the helm of KRL International, I'm sure you guys are going to do very well.
We appreciate that. I have a young, dynamic firm, Marianne. We have it's about 6 professionals and 2 advisors that are based in different parts of the world. But I do celebrate young people and training. And for example, my managing director, Chris Beatty, has been with me since the day the company started, and he came in as an intern. So we find young people, we groom them, they grow, and then they drive the business.
Oh, that's perfect. And, what a great legacy that you leave with your company as well as you, as your company grows and you go forward, you have these young people moving forward also, carrying on the work, which is so important. So, I know a lot of times people have difficulties finding heroes in their own life. What advice would you give to them to choose their own hero?
I think it takes time and perseverance, and that things don't always come to you right away. So just putting yourself in the arena and doing work that interests you and that you feel that you're contributing something. And I don't think you go to work each day seized with, I have to find this person, or I have to, know what I'm going to be doing and who I'm going to be supporting. I think you go every day and you feel like you're making a contribution and you're growing as a person and you're growing with the skill set, and then the opportunities come along. And one of the lessons I learned in my life is that the concept of destiny, it takes a long time, and you don't know where you're going to end up, so you have to embrace the journey and feel good about what you're doing. You'll always have compromises, because even in our business, it's very tough to maintain a business and always be working with the projects and people that you always want to work with, because sometimes that's financially difficult, so you have to figure out how to balance your company, be able to keep people on. But as long as you're on the right track, I think that type of inspiration will come. And my story shows you that I was almost a decade into my professional career before I looked at this conference table that I was sitting on and just didn't want to be seated where I was. And that's when I found my inspiration. With choosing the hero, I think one of the things that we're trying to think about is really looking at that issue and how to have a conversation like this nationally, maybe with the book as somewhat of an inspiration or as a basis to help people understand what they can do as they go on that journey, and realize they don't just have to latch on to somebody or some politician and say, this is my hero and I'm going to fight for them. They can be more deliberate. It can be an entrepreneur, an idea. It can be an app, you know. It can be a child. It can be anything. So that, I think, is hopefully that opens the dialogue.
Oh, definitely. And with your story, in many ways, I think there were two heroes that were chosen. Of course, President-sirleaf, but also when you had that realization that, hey, I think I'm sitting on the wrong side of the table, I want to be sitting with her, you chose yourself as a hero, and then you kind of branched out from there.
Thanks for saying that. I didn't exactly see it that way, that I chose myself as a hero, but I appreciate that interpretation.
Well, thank you, and thank you for all that you've been doing. And for our listeners out there, we'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com. Ben Wexler is a gifted leadership development and strategy consultant for professionals who want to transform their organizations and careers. Through a uniquely personalized set of processes, participants discover their unique knowledge, how to leverage that knowledge and experience, and then put it all together with a global strategy. You're more valuable, your organization is more valuable, and the change is viral. Contact Ben at 630-881-1074, 630-881-1074.
Discover the book publisher's weekly calls compelling. Piper, Once and Again, is the breathtaking debut novel by psychic medium Caroline E. Zani. Death has no power over love. Piper, Once and Again, is a story of hope for the hopeless and faith amidst tragedy. Follow Piper on a journey of loss and redemption as she tries to find the one man who can help her figure out why she must be. Piper, Once and Again. www.carolinezani.com.
Are you a successful entrepreneur? entrepreneur or sales professional, but you're ready to take your success to the next level? I'm Bob Berg, and I invite you to join me at our next Go Giver Sales Academy. You'll learn how to communicate your exceptional value to more people, sell at full price, become objection-proof, and embrace the abundance that's your birthright. Limited to just 12 people, so it's personalized, impactful, and transformational. Visit GoGiverSalesAcademy.com and see what others are saying.
Hello, this is J.J. Burton, former NFL pro football player, now author, keynote speaker, elite trainer, and success coach. To play in the NFL, it takes certain qualities, principles, and a work ethic that's unmatched. The secret strategy for success is something that I train top leaders, CEOs, sales teams, and entrepreneurs who are looking to move their game to the next level. If you need some VIP coaching or looking for a motivational and spirited keynote speaker, hire me and cultivate a culture of success by visiting jjburden.com.
This is Tanya Carroll Richardson, author of the new book, Angel Insights. I used my psychic gifts to get messages from the angels to write this book, and I'd like to help you get personalized messages from your own angels. Learn your subconscious blocks, make sense of the past and present, and receive advice about navigating your future in an angel reading at TanyaBlessings.com. Book a session with me and your angels at TanyaBlessings.com.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We are here with a very special guest, Nathalie Herrman. She's the author of the book, The Art of Good Habits, Health, Love, Presence, and Prosperity. Welcome to the show, Nathalie.
Thank you.
Hey, what an honor to have you here. You know, I picked up the book and just had to have you on the show. I mean, it looks like it's just filled with some great information.
Well, that is the hope.
So our listeners that might not know about you, can you take a moment and just briefly, tell us what inspired you to write this book?
Absolutely. This is actually my second book. My first book, Daily Enlightenment, is a book of daily reflections. So each one is a grounding tool and a centering tool with very practical spirituality and practical approach to life. And along those same practical inclinations, I felt driven to write this book, The Art of Good Habits, because it's been my personal experience that if we just take some very simple action steps, we have the power to change anything and everything in our lives that isn't working. And I've experienced this on many levels and planes myself, and I wanted to share my experience with others because I find that we have a tendency in our culture to really overcomplicate things. The original working title for this book was Food, Love, Money, and Time. And I really believe that these are things many of us struggle with, and they're certainly things that I have a history of struggling with. And I've largely let go of my struggle, and this is my experience. So that was my inspiration, was to draw on my personal experience with the hope that what I learned and the errors that I've made along the way and I have a certain talent to simplify things, to take a tremendous amount of information and stuff and simplify it in a way that is very user-friendly. So that is my hope, is that this is an extremely practical and useful tool for people to make use of when they want to change something that isn't working in their lives, particularly as it relates to these subjects primarily, but it can really be applied across the board. So that was my inspiration. I have a passion to share with others, and I'm all about empowerment. I'm a personal trainer by trade also, so I work with individuals one-on-one to help them get fit and achieve weight loss goals and other things like that. And So the idea of personal empowerment is very close to my heart. And it's something, as I said, I've had to learn myself. And so that's really the seed for this.
Well, yeah, and I think those topics that you hit on, there's, people can relate to one or more of those topics as being like a place that they kind of get thrown in the bushes or get hung up on. It's if it's not weight, maybe it's money, or it's time. It really kind of depends on, what their buttons are. And so I really appreciated your book because it went and approached all these different areas, and it made it really like kind of cut and dry and simple. You really got to the root of it.
Well, again, that's the idea and that's the goal. So I'm thrilled to hear you say that. And as I mentioned earlier, I think that we have a tendency to overcomplicate things and to make a lot of excuses for ourselves about all the reasons why it can't happen for us, or it won't happen for us, or not now, or whatever our excuse may be. And this book is really designed to strip away excuses and give a very basic step-by-step journey, roadmap, plan to be able to get there, so that it sort of strips us of excuses. And that was the hope. So I'm glad to hear that you felt that it was simple, because that is really what I was after here. I think it is fundamentally really simple. And you had mentioned that people are generally challenged with one or more of these areas possibly, and one maybe more than another, but it's really been my experience that one bleeds into the other. So if we are rushing through our meals and not eating mindfully and enjoying what we're eating and using food as nourishment and approaching it in that sort of spiritual way, but eating on the run and whatnot, then chances are we're also living on the run, and we're experiencing our life in much the same rushed kind of a fashion, and maybe missing out on the experience of loving exchange with other human beings entirely because we're so busy all the time. And so I really think one thing leads into another, and along those same lines, maybe spending money sort of recklessly and buying impulsively. And so the way that we approach one of these topics, I have found very much seems to be the way that we approach the others. My personal journey began with on the health front, the food front. For me, it had to do with alcohol as well. So it was about alcohol, it was about food, it was about exercise, and learning to experience and enjoy these things in a balanced way, so that food in particular was not completely controlling my life, because I really was in a place where I was always trying to lose, a little bit of weight, and I would be very good and disciplined for a period of time, and then I would be completely permissive and feel frustrated and guilty, and it was just this sort of yo-yo effect. I'm sure there are other people, maybe your listeners, who can relate to that. And I just got to a place where I was sick and tired of being controlled by food, and I wanted to take the power back. And that was really where I began. And what I discovered as I went on that journey, I became very conscious of what I was eating. I kept a journal, and that was the beginning of this book, really. And what I discovered was that as my relationship with food got healthier, my relationship with people got healthier, and my relationship with time got healthier. And all of these things were affected. I think of it very much sort of an analogy like the Russian dolls, where you open one and there's another one inside, and you open that one, there's another one inside, and there's this whole continuous stream of dolls. Some of those Russian doll sets have like 30 dolls inside of them. And I really believe that the connections can be that vast. So my approach, and in this book I talk about it, and I really believe it in my core, all we need to do is pick one thing, one area in our life where we're challenged, where we're struggling, where we're feeling like it has power over us, and just approach this one thing. It can be something very simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. And we turn our attention and all of our energy to this one particular thing. And as we do that, there's a very basic process, which is, I call it stop, start, sustain. And that's the driving force behind changing any habit, in my opinion. And what it is stop what's not working in your life, a particular action, a particular daily, repetitive thing that you are doing that is sabotaging you or that is keeping you from getting what you want. So stop that action. And then pick a substitute action that's going to drive you in the direction of where you want to be and start that behavior. And then the third part is sustain, which is sustain the new behavior until such a point that it becomes involuntary and automatic. In other words, a habit. Because once something is a habit, we don't even have to think about it anymore. It becomes ingrained. But what happens is as we go about changing, we do a diet or something like that, or we go to the gym and exercise at the first of the year and then stop, we never sustain it quite long enough. And so we stop before the miracle happens, if you will, and the miracle is that line, that invisible line that we cross over where suddenly we've done it enough that it's now a habit and we don't even have to think about it anymore. And as we change one habit, then all of a sudden our lives start to get better in other areas, like I was just saying, that Russian doll phenomenon. And then we turn our attention to the next thing that's troubling us, and we do the same thing. We stop, we start, we sustain, and we create a little change there. And this can be used across the board. And what happens is that as we take this action, our lives get better, and we feel better, and it's just awesome. Life is so rich and so grand, and we live in this distractible world, and I think we get so caught up in the tyranny of the urgent and the nonstop demands upon us and all this instant gratification, everything, that we really often miss out on what really matters and the value of our lives and the gift of our lives and those feelings of gratitude and love and prosperity that we are able to feel if we just raise our consciousness. And a lot of this book is also about that. It's really about raising awareness so that we know, so that we can bring our attention to what we are interested in, what we want, what we need to do to get it, and then following the path.
Well, and, and that's, I really appreciate the methodology and the ideology that you bring to this book, because it makes it so that someone can pick this book up and then go ahead and kind of follow through and like jumpstart their life in a different direction, like today, not like 3 months from now or 5 or 6 months from now. And there are very practical guides here. One of the things I really liked is your honesty exercise that you have. Like let's get honest about how we feel about our body image. And I think a lot of people have a little bit of that going on in one shape or form or another. And then walking that through from body image to how we eat, to how we love, to our finances. But you're 100% right, because, if we are kind of treating ourselves funky in one area, in one of these areas, it's really showing up in all of our relationships with ourselves and with others.
Yes, I agree. I absolutely agree.
Mm-hmm. Now, and one of the things that I wanted to kind of have you explain for our listeners here. Now, how important is honesty, and what kind of role does it play in developing good habits?
Well, honesty is critical, self-honesty, and obviously we're only as honest as we're capable of being on any given day. But we get ourselves into a lot of trouble by not being self-honest. And that's really, honesty is critical because it's the starting point. It's the place from which all change can begin, can happen. And there's another honesty exercise that I don't think was the one you were referring to, which is early in the book. The book, by the way, has exercises you perform as you go through, and they're really meant to simplify, to clarify, to center you in truth and all of that. And one of the first ones in the book has to do with honesty, and it's about what we tell ourselves. So it takes a very convoluted stream of thought and encourages the reader to write down whatever they're struggling with and be as long-winded about it as they want to be. So, for example, something along the lines of, I really want to lose weight, but I've tried every diet there is, and none of them work for me, and I hate going to the gym because it's so complicated, and I don't like wearing the clothes, and I get self-conscious there, and it just never works for me. okay, so that's jumbled. What is the kernel of truth in all that? And so what the exercise does is it encourages the reader to take that jumbled paragraph and break it down and simplify it and just get rid of all the non-essential stuff until you come down to this very particular kernel of truth, which is, in this particular situation, something like diets have never worked for me. Okay, so you need to approach it in a way that isn't like a diet, maybe. And so once you have that kernel of truth, whatever it is, then you can start. Then you can say, okay, so if this is the truth, then what is it that I want instead of whatever this thing may be? And it really works. I think that we're afraid on some level, perhaps, to be honest with ourselves, because we think if we open our eyes and see what's really going on, that we're going to feel badly or something, that we're going to feel guilty or ashamed, or, if we put on the blinders and just pretend that we're not in an unhappy marriage, or that we're more in shape than we think we are, or that we're really managing our finances okay, even though we have, thousands and thousands of dollars of debt, credit card debt. Whatever it may be, it's so easy to put the blinders on and just pretend like everything is okay. I'm sure we've all done this. I've certainly done this, and I'm sure I still do it on some level.
Yeah. Well,
but
I think a lot of people have. I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah, and so the idea is there isn't any freedom in that, because even though we have the blinders on, there's a little part of us inside that knows the truth. And so even though we may pretend to the world and to everyone else, even to ourselves, that everything's hunky-dory, there's that little part inside of us that knows it's not, that knows we're living kind of a lie. And that gets bigger, and it almost is like a termite of the soul, and it will eat away at us and eat away at us until it becomes manifested in some sort of a, sickness, physical sickness or something like that. It always seems to come ooching out sideways in some sort of physical manifestation, just some horrible whatever ailment that we can't get over, or even just a cold. And so a lot of times that's why these really horrific things happen in our lives, to shake us up and get us to a place where we start to recognize that we have to get honest, or we're going to suffer deeply. And so my point is, why have to go through all that difficulty? Get honest now. Because if you can just get honest now, then you can avoid all that heartache and that hardship and the boom coming down upon you. And the thing that's so exciting about self-honesty is that it is freeing. It is like opening the gates and letting us out. Because the minute that we admit the truth, oh my God, all of our defenses just wash away, and we are standing there exposed, and we haven't died, we haven't crumbled, nothing. We're just there standing in the truth, and it is so, it's just such a relief. And so the point is, let's get honest and know that we have the power to change anything that's not working in our lives. We are not stuck, and we are not victims. Like I said, I'm all about empowerment. I'm all about personal empowerment, and that requires that we take responsibility for ourselves and stop blaming everybody else and our circumstances and this, that, and the other, because if we don't like our circumstances, we have the ability to change them. And even if we can't change our physical circumstances immediately, we can change our attitude about them. We can change our approach to them. We can change the habits that we form around whatever the thing is that we're having a hard time with. We can get help. I mean, there's so many action steps that we can take. But instead, we put on the blinders, we plop down in front of the TV at night, we watch our shows, we go on our computer, look on our phones, and we stay in this sort of unconscious, numb state that keeps us in this prison. And we sort of, there's that other part of us, that inner part of us that knows the truth, that also knows what we're capable of and longs for it. Oh, there's got to be something better. There's got to be something more for me. And we feel this sort of spiritual depression because we're living this sort of mediocre life when there's some part of us that knows that there's more possible. And so this book, again, it's about like step up and claim it. This is your life, own it, enjoy it. What do you want? Because anything that you want, you can have it. But you've got to put in the work, and you've got to, get honest. And that's the first part, is getting honest. And then the next thing after get honest is get willing. Because once you've been honest about what's needs some help, then you have to become willing to do something about it. So there are 4 major spiritual principles that this book is sort of pillared on. One of them, the first one is honesty. The second one is willingness. The third one is awareness, and the fourth one is appreciation. And so this is a little bit of the pattern. With these basic spiritual principles, we really can shift the entire energy of our lives. And you don't have to be perfect, but you do have to be willing. And what that means is willing to show up. And if you fall off the step or whatever, you get back on it and you do it again and you do it again. And you have to be willing also to believe that you're worth it. We all have to be willing to believe that we're worth it, because a lot of times I think that we have, parental critical parent voices in our heads, or our own critical voices, the internal critic that's saying, oh, who are you kidding? You're not worth it. This is going to work for everybody else, but it's not going to work for you, and all of this stuff. And we have to, that willingness part of it it's about being willing to change our belief system and quiet that voice when it comes up, because that's not our higher self voice. That's a critic. That's just an internal critic voice. We also have an internal voice, which is very much of a guide and very much of a friend. And we have to learn to listen to that voice instead of the critical voice. We have to shh that critical voice and say no.
Well, and it's really easy to kind of get caught back up into that negative train of thought. I kind of want to wrap back around, because you've mentioned some things that are just absolutely profound. And I kind of want to get back. So let's say someone has their paragraph and it's a jumbled mess, and they're like, I can't even decipher this. Now, do you do sessions with people, or coaching sessions, so that they can find out what their angst is, so they can start moving forward?
I don't generally do that, but I certainly would be willing if there was someone who really felt they needed some help and that the book wasn't clear enough, or that they were extremely stuck. Absolutely, someone could reach out to me. I'm very responsive to emails and whatnot, and so sure, if someone just really feels inclined or compelled to ask for some help from me directly and reach out, by all means, they can send me an email and we'll work it out together. We'll figure it out. I'd be happy to help anyone.
Okay.
And my website is pragmaticaction.com. And if anybody just goes to that website, there's all kinds of ways to contact me via email and everything, just on the contact page and whatnot. So that's a great resource, is just pragmaticaction.com.
Okay.
So yes.
Yeah, and one of the other things that you brought up is that you mentioned that, if we can't change, and we were talking in regards to our physical selves. If we can't change it, because that doesn't change overnight. 2 years of having unhealthy habits, having a week of working out isn't automatically going to change everything. There has to be time that's put into that too. But you did mention that we can change our attitude about it. So what would be some of the things that you would suggest to people, let's say, because I know a few people who are like stressful eaters, so if they get stressed out, they're chomping on something. So how could they change their attitude in regards to maybe how they're feeling, or how they are working through that, resolving that bad habit and exchanging it for a good one?
Well, there are a couple things that you said in there that I want to address. The first one is that in changing anything, you said, a lifetime of unhealthy eating or 20 years of unhealthy eating isn't going to get fixed in a week, and that's absolutely true. And I like to share with people an analogy that I use in the book. I use it with my clients a lot as well. And the idea is it's making these kinds of changes in our lives is very much like turning a cruise ship. It's huge, and it does not turn on a dime like a little Mini Cooper can turn. It is a big thing. It's been established for years. And so a cruise ship turns by very slight degrees. And if you're on the cruise ship, you are not even aware that it's turning, because it's happening so slowly in such a slow arc. But it does turn slowly by degrees. And what happens is that you don't feel like anything is happening at all, and then all of a sudden you look up and it's heading in a completely opposite direction. It's made the full turn. And our changing of habits are very much like that. So I think that's an important analogy to be aware of as we approach this. In terms of the individuals you mentioned who are stress eaters, there are all kinds of eating things. People eat because they're bored, they eat because they're stressed. But again, what's important is to identify, first of all, what do you want? So if the answer is I don't want to feel stressed, that's a little bit different. Like if what someone wants is I don't want to feel stressed and that's why I'm eating, that's a little different to deal with than I don't want to be overweight, because it's a little different angle. So if I don't want to be stressed is the truth, then the identification of the behavior that needs to stop is the stress eating, because eating is not necessarily, or probably chances are there's a combination. So my guess is that if someone is stress eating, the eating may give them a little bit of temporary comfort, and so in a way it does solve the stress problem, but not in a way that's satisfying, because at the end of the feast, the fest, there's probably feelings of bloat, guilt, whatever. Oh my God, I can't believe I did that. And so it plays into more stress. So although it may be a temporary relief of stress, it's not an ultimate relief of stress. So if the goal is to have ultimate relief of stress, then probably not eating as a response to stress is going to be helpful. So then you have to stop stress eating. But then there has to be a substitution behavior. So when you feel stressed and you're triggered to eat, because that's what you're used to doing, you have to come up with something else that you do. And maybe it's something like put on your favorite song and get up and move your body around for 3 minutes. Now, when you first do that, that's not going to be totally satisfying, because you're going to be kind of craving the ice cream or the pizza or whatever it is that you go for. But what happens is that if you can just do it the first time and then do it the second time, and if you can just stick with it, that's where the discipline comes in. There is a little element of discipline here. It's hard in the beginning, but then it gets easier and easier and easier. And what happens is that all of a sudden, maybe dancing is too complicated of an example. Let's just say rather than going to stress eating, you do a set of 10 deep breaths. So when you feel that pressure building in you and you want to go for the food and open the fridge and everything else, instead of doing that, you say, no, I'm going to stop. I'm not going to do that. And then you sit and you breathe deeply. And maybe when you're done breathing, you feel a little less stressed. My own personal experience is that generally walking outside, changing your environment, doing some deep breathing, moving the body a little bit, these are things that help to relieve stress because it changes your environment. Now, sometimes we are stressed out because we actually need to eat, because we're hungry, we've skipped a meal or something, and in that case, we need to sit down and have a thoughtful, careful meal. But again, and then we'll feel more grounded and more earthed, and it really will help. But if it's stress eating, like it's a response to stress, I doubt that ever works for people. I don't know if that answers your question directly.
No, that's actually perfect, because it really does give our listeners something to use, and we definitely want them to go ahead and pick up your book, The Art of Good Habits. It's available at all major retailers, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and visit your website where they can be part of your community, pragmatic-action.com, and sign up for your newsletter and follow you on social media. So, we could talk all day. You are really a fountain of information, let me tell you.
Well, it's just all from my personal experience. Just as a mention on that website, Marianne, they don't have to put the hyphen in. They'll get there if they just type in pragmatic action also. So don't get too hung up on the hyphen. So, it's just pragmaticaction.com. Either way, they'll get there.
Oh, perfect. Well, thank you for being on the show today, Nathalie.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm always happy to talk with people about empowerment, and I just would say to the listeners, go for it. You're worth it. And I totally believe that you can have it, whatever you want. Just pick up the book and it'll tell you how to get there.
Oh, perfect. And, again, thank you for being a part of the show today and spending your time with us and sharing all this great information. And I'd like to thank our listeners for tuning in today. And remember, make every moment count.
Join us next time for Moments with Marianne, when host Marianne Pestana brings another inspirational gifted leader to help us grow. Tune in every second Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time for Moments with Marianne, when the Dream Vision 7 radio network is at 1510 a.m. Boston. Or catch Moments with Marianne every Thursday and Friday at 5 p.m. and 5 a.m. Eastern Time by going to dreamvision7radio.com. To learn how Marianne started her business from the ground up, visit mariannepestana.com. Don't miss this, and remember, make every moment count.